Hello and welcome to this lesson about percent of numbers. The learning target for this video is using proportions and ratios to find percents of numbers. So first of all, let's remember what a percent is. Percent is simply a ratio out of 100. So percent equals P, which is a number, over 100. Okay? So for example, if we say something like 55%, that is equal to 55 over 100. Now, what we're going to end up doing is starting to do some problems with percents. And with that, we get a really important proportion, two ratios that are set equal to each other. And we get A over B is equal to C over 100. And so that's how this is going to work. You might be given A and B, and then you're going to be tasked with figuring out, well, what is the percent out of 100? You might be given A and C, and you got to figure out what B is. You might be given B and C, and you got to figure out what A is. There's many ways these can go. But if you can kind of understand this proportion right here and start putting pieces in their places, it can help out a lot. And now let me show you a skill that could be useful for solving this. And that is cross multiplication. What that is where we take the denominator from one number and we multiply it by the numerator of the other number. And so cross multiplication is 100A equals BC. And so the thing is, if we're going to try to find something like A, so actually let me write this down slightly differently. Alright, so if we want A, what we're going to do is multiply B and C together. And then we necessarily don't, and then we'll divide by 100 or convert it to a percent from there. Now, if we want A, sorry about that. Try that again. Want A. We're going to multiply B and C. Now, let's say we wanted to end up figuring out what C is, or sorry, not C, what B is. So if we want B, what we're going to have to do is divide by C. So we'll go A divided by C. And that will help us get it. So we would divide by C. Later, when you get into algebra, the algebra of this will make a little bit more sense. But right now, we're just trying to find some patterns. And in fact, let me help you show why this works. So let's use some simple numbers to help make a bigger point. Let's say we're going to use the number 10. And we're going to use the number 50%. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a line in the middle. So let's say our first problem is, what is 50% of 10? Well, now, I think most of us know the answer off the top of our head. 50% of 10 is 5, because 50% is half. Half of 10 is 5. How did we do that? Well, let's think here. Let's kind of draw this out. Let's say we had 10 numbers right here. All right, and we can break it down into strips if we want. So 2, 3. All right, maybe not perfectly evenly spaced, but you got 10 strips of them. And if we want 50% of it, what we're going to do is kind of outline it, and we're going to take 50% of that red rectangle, which means we're going to take half of it, and so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, again, now let's think about what did we actually do mathematically. What we did is we took 10 and times it by 0.50. Now, when you're multiplying by a 10, you just have to bump the decimal over one spot, which is 5. And that goes back to the rule we were talking about here. If we want A, we multiply B and C, because what we want is something over 10 is equal to 50 over 100. So we multiply those together. And then end up dividing by 100 to make it a percent. Now, let's look at a slightly different problem. Let's say 10 is 50% of what number? Now this one, it's a little bit harder. So again, let's draw it out and see what we get here. So this time I'm not going to make all 10 spots. But let's just say, yeah, that number is 10. But what we have is a larger number, and 10 is only 50% of it. All right, and so we have to wonder is how many more groups of 10 we can fit in that other side. And the way that would work is, well, I mean, we kind of see it now. 10 is 50% of some number, so if it's 50%, it's covering half. There should be another 10. Add those together, and we end up getting 20 as the big number. Well, how did we do that? So for this one, what we're going to have to do is, and I mentioned it on the other screen, divide. So we go 10 divided by 50%, which is 0.50. And so we would make our long division. We would go with 10, and then we would go with 0.5, bump the decimal over one spot, bump the decimal over one spot. 5 goes into 10 twice, you get 10, do some subtraction, 0, 0, 20, boom, done. So it is 20. And now what we can do is we can make slightly more, we could use this method on slightly more complex versions of these problems. So let's say, what is 25% of 80? Well, again, what I'm going to do here is I have my number 80, and I'm going to figure out what 25% of it is. And here it's really helpful if we know some decimal and fraction equivalents. 0.25 is the same as 1/4. I want 1/4 of 80. This is all I want right there. So what can I do? Or 1/4 of 80 is the same as saying 4 or 80 times 1/4, which is the same as saying 80 divided by 4, which is 20. So anytime we see that of, we can just multiply these together, and sometimes it might be easier to swap out the percentages for a decimal. And then let's do one more example, and we'll use the same numbers, and we'll go with 80 is 25% of what number? All right, so again, what we're going to do is we're going to take 80, and it's part of a much larger number, and we got to ask ourselves, how many more 80s can we fit in here? Well, if we know 80 is 25%, we're going to do some division. We're going to go 80 divided by 0.25. Now notice how I'm quickly switching between decimal and percentages, because you can't do anything with the percent sign. You have to turn it to a decimal. Now that looks like a tough problem, but again, I'm going to use some of my prior knowledge here and go with 80 divided by 1/4. 25 or 0.25, 1/4, same thing. Now I'll do a little keep change flip, and I get 80 times 4 over 1, which is the same as saying 80 times 4, which is 320. If I did the long division, I'd get the same thing, but this is just a lot easier. So this is how we find percents of numbers. We essentially go back to this number, or this proportion right here. We have A over B equals C over 100. You'll see this more later down the road, but ultimately we're given two of them. We got to find the third one. And so it breaks down to you're either going to multiply them together, like here, or you're going to do division with them, like there. So good luck with your homework or practice, and let me know if you have any questions.